Please, give me my child back. Please, my baby, return to me.
She was the girl whose eyes carried the color of the ocean, deep, endless, and alive. But one night, she heard a voice calling through the silence. A woman was in the fields, crying, her hands buried in the soil, screaming, "Give me back my child. Please, give me my baby back." Ella followed the sound to the riverbank, and when she looked into the water, what she saw was not human. That night changed everything. Love found her in the form of something beyond this world, and from that moment, her heart was no longer her own. Ella lived in a small village surrounded by green fields and tall trees. People in the village often said that she was the most beautiful girl they had ever seen. Her beauty was quiet, not loud or proud, but soft and deep, like the sound of the wind passing through the wheat at sunset. Her skin had the glow of morning light, warm and soft. Her hair was long chestnut brown with golden threads that shone whenever sunlight touched them. Sometimes, when she worked in the fields, the wind would lift her hair, and for a moment, it looked like autumn leaves caught in motion. But it was her eyes that everyone remembered. They were blue, not the light kind that fades in daylight, but deep like the ocean before a storm. Whoever looked into them could not look away. It felt as if her eyes held stories that no one could fully understand. The men of the village watched her secretly. Some of them prayed that one day she might notice them. Old women blessed her when she passed by, whispering that such beauty must come from heaven, but Ellen never paid attention to the whispers. She did her chores quietly and stayed close to her mother. Her father had died years ago, leaving only memories and debt. Her mother worked from morning till night, cleaning houses, washing clothes, and helping in the fields. Ella went with her wherever she could. She cooked, fetched water, and gathered firewood. Her mother often said, "We may be poor, but we will never lose our dignity." Ella would smile softly and nod. That was all. Though many admired her, Ellen never let anyone close. She kept her world small, safe, and quiet. The river was her favorite place. It ran beyond the village and curved behind a group of tall willows. She liked sitting there in the evenings, listening to the sound of water touching stones. It made her feel less lonely. One afternoon, while returning from work, a stranger arrived at their home. He was tall, dressed in fine clothes, and spoke politely. His name was Richard. He had come from the nearby town to inspect land his father owned near the river. When he saw Ella for the first time, he could not look away. He felt as if he had seen a piece of heaven walking on earth. The next day, Richard returned. He spoke to Ella's mother and said, "I wish to marry your daughter." The mother was shocked. For a moment, she thought she had heard wrong. But Richard's face was serious, and his eyes were kind. Tears filled the old woman's eyes. It felt like a blessing she had never expected. Ella did not say anything at first. She looked at her mother, then at Richard. He smiled at her with warmth. Something about him felt safe. Maybe it was his calm voice or the way he waited for her answer without pressure. Finally, Ella nodded. Their wedding was simple, but beautiful. The whole village came to see the poor girl marry a man from the city. Lanterns hung from every door and music filled the air. When Ella walked out wearing her white dress, everyone fell silent. She looked like the moon had stepped down to bless the earth. Richard took her hand and whispered, "You are the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." For months after the wedding, life was perfect. Richard built her a small but comfortable house near the river. They laughed often, walked together, and spent long evenings watching the sun disappear behind the water. Ella cooked for him, sang while cleaning, and waited at the door every evening for his return. For the first time, she felt complete. But time has a way of testing happiness. A year passed, and Ella did not become a mother. At first, Richard told her not to worry. "It will happen when it's meant to," he said kindly. But slowly his tone changed. He stopped smiling as much. He began to stay longer in the town, returning late and tired. When he looked at her, his eyes no longer carried love, only disappointment. One evening, he said words that cut her heart open. What kind of wife cannot give her husband a child? She stood still, tears running silently down her face. He left the room, leaving her alone in the dark. Days became heavier. Ella tried every remedy she heard of. Her mother prayed with her, nothing changed. Then, one afternoon, Richard came home with another woman. She was young, pretty, and already expecting a child. Ella's heart stopped. Richard said calmly, "I've made another choice. I need an heir. You understand." He did not even look ashamed. From that day, Ella lived in her own house like a ghost. The other woman, Clara, smiled too brightly, laughed too loudly, and threw careless words like stones. "Poor Ella," she would say. "Maybe if you had more charm, your husband would still love you." Richard never defended her. Sometimes he even joined in, his voice cold and sharp. He criticized her cooking, her silence, her presence. Once, in anger, he pushed her so hard she fell. Her hair spread across the floor, her eyes full of tears, but she said nothing. At night, she went to the river. She cried until her chest ached. The water listened without judgment. Over time, it became her friend, her secret. She spoke to it as if it were alive. "You understand me, don't you?" she whispered. "You take everything that falls into you and still keep flowing." Weeks passed. One night, while fetching water, she heard a strange sound. It was the faint cry of a baby. She froze. The sound came again, soft but clear. Ella placed her jar down and followed the sound to the edge of the river. The moon was bright, and the surface of the river shimmered like silver. When she looked closely, she saw something unbelievable. There, caught in the shallow part of the river, was a tiny creature. At first, she thought it was a child, but when she lifted it carefully, she gasped. The baby had soft, pale skin, but where legs should have been, there was a small silver tail that sparkled like moonlight. It was a mermaid's child. Instead of fear, Ella felt warmth in her chest. The baby's cry softened as soon as she held it close. It looked up at her with big, shining eyes. In that moment, Ella forgot her pain. She smiled for the first time in months. "Don't cry," she whispered. "You're safe now." She wrapped it in her shawl and took it home. From that night, everything changed. Ella cared for the little creature as if it were her own. She sang lullabies, fed it milk, and held it while she slept. The baby grew fast, and its eyes were just like the river's, blue, calm, endless. People in the village noticed that Ella seemed happier again. She smiled more, and even Clara's cruel words no longer reached her heart. But peace never lasts forever. Soon, Ella began having strange dreams. In her dreams, she saw a tall, shining woman rising from the depths of the river. Her hair floated around her like silver threads, and her voice echoed through the night. "Return, my child, or your world will break." Ella would wake up sweating, her heart beating fast. She tried to ignore the dreams, but they kept coming, louder each time. Then, one morning, the river began to dry. The water that had once been full of life now turned dark and shallow. Fish died, plants withered, and the villagers grew afraid. At night, people heard a woman's cry across the fields, soft at first, then piercing. "Give me back my child," the voice wept. The elders gathered and said, "Someone has stolen a spirit's child. The river is angry. If we don't return it, disaster will fall upon us." Ella's heart broke. She knew it was her fault. The child she had loved and cared for was not hers. But how could she let go? That little being had filled the emptiness that had almost destroyed her. Yet she also knew that if she didn't do the right thing, innocent people might suffer. That night, as the village slept, she took the child in her arms. It was quiet, asleep, its tiny tail glowing faintly. She kissed its forehead and whispered, "My little one, I love you. You saved me when I had nothing left." With tears streaming down her face, she walked toward the river. The sky was heavy with clouds. The riverbed glimmered faintly, even though there was no moon. When she stepped into the shallow water, it began to glow brighter. Then the surface rippled, and the great woman from her dreams rose from the depths. She was beautiful and terrifying all at once, her eyes like waves, and her voice like thunder wrapped in silk. "Ella," she said, "you cared for my child when I could not. For that, I will remember you forever." Ella placed the baby gently into the woman's arms. The water swirled around them, shining with blue light. As the child disappeared beneath the surface, the river came back to life. The water flowed strong again, birds sang, and the air filled with the scent of rain. Ella stood there, crying and smiling at the same time. She had given up her heart, but she had saved everyone. Weeks passed. The river was full again, and the land healed, but Ella became weaker. She spent more time resting and often looked toward the river as if waiting for someone. One morning, her mother found her sitting by the water, her hand on her stomach, her face calm. The village healer came, checked her, and smiled. "She is not sick," the healer said softly. "She is expecting twins." When Ella heard it, she could hardly believe it. Tears filled her eyes. She looked toward the river and whispered, "You remembered me." Months later, she gave birth to 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl. Both had the same ocean blue eyes as the river child she had once loved. People in the village began to speak of miracles. Even Richard returned, his face pale and full of shame. He asked for forgiveness, but Ella said nothing. She no longer needed his apology. Her heart belonged to something greater, to kindness, to faith, to the water that had both taken and returned life. Years later, on quiet nights, Ella would sit by the river with her children. She would tell them stories about the spirit who lived beneath the waves and how love could exist even between worlds. Sometimes, when the wind was gentle, the water would sparkle, and it sounded as though someone was laughing softly beneath the surface. Ella would smile and whisper, "Thank you." The villagers still tell her story. They say the river never forgets those who love it with a pure heart. And if you walk by that river under a full moon, you might see a woman's reflection sitting beside 2 small children, smiling at the water that once took her pain and turned it into hope. Do you think Ella deserved what happened to her? She lost so much, yet in the end, life gave her peace and love in return. Maybe the river really did bless her, or maybe it was just the power of her pure heart. What do you think? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.